thank you for watching my channel today. My name's Sarah, my channel is called Your True Self, and today I am talking about the books which I read in the month of July. So it's actually not the end of July yet, it is the 30th of July today, but I can't envisage myself finishing another book before tomorrow, so I thought I may as well record now. We just got back from a day of canoeing, which was really fun. So I've never been canoeing before, and one of the school mums suggested that we go because our children are in the same classes at school, and we had such a fun time. It was really good. We got a family canoe, so me and my husband and my two kids could fit in our canoe, and it took us a while to get it right because we hadn't done it before. So we had a few like escapades where we kind of just sort of hit against trees, rushes, that kind of thing. Nearly ran over a heron, which wasn't so good, but it was fine. The heron was unharmed. So we had a really lovely day, and I came back and I just thought, actually, I really need to film a video, so this is what I'm doing. So I feel like my reading month for July was actually a bit rubbish, but it started off really well, and then it didn't. I just had a couple of books which made me kind of slumpy. So anyway, I will go through what I've read. So it started off well. So the first book I read was a library book that I've had out for ages, and it is called Sweet Bean Paste by Durian Sukegawa. It's translated from Japanese, and I really enjoyed this book. This was a 4-star read for me. I heard about this book from Christiane Jones, as I think it was one of her books of the year last year, and I'm afraid I can't remember the characters' names because it was a library book and I've now given it back. But basically our main protagonist is a chap who, he's been to prison, he is drinking quite a lot, he has some debts that he has to pay off, so he's working at a shop which makes sweet bean paste pancakes. And he's just kind of going through the motions of doing it. Like, he buys in the paste, like pre-made, and the shop's kind of ticking along okay. He's paying back some of the money that he owes, but he doesn't care about his job. And then one day there's an elderly lady who comes to him several times and says, like, I've been making these sweet bean pancakes for ages, like for like 50 years or something, like, please can I come and work at the shop? I'd really love to. She had leprosy when she was a child, and then it talks about this whole thing in Japan which I had no idea about, where people with leprosy were made to live in these sort of sanatoriums, and they weren't, even when they were cured, they weren't allowed to go back into society, and so they were stuck in these sanatoriums for decades. And it wasn't until I think the 90s where this legislation was redacted and people could join the society again. So she was taken into a sanatorium when she was a teenager. She had to leave her whole family, and then she didn't, by the time she was released, she was like an elderly lady, and most of her family had died. So it was really, really sad, and it was sort of a focus of the book was for us to learn about what happened in Japan, because I had no clue at all. So I really enjoyed that one. Then I read an amazing book which is called English Animals by Kaye, and I've wanted to read this for a really long time. I got it from the Libby app, so anyone who has Libby, like, I'd really recommend it. And this book follows Mirka, and Mirka is from Slovakia, and she has come to the UK to find work. She was working in London in kind of bar jobs and stuff, but she wasn't really enjoying it. She wasn't making any money, so she applied to go to live with this couple who are quite wealthy in this kind of English country house. She doesn't really know what she's going to be doing there, but it turns out that she is going to be a taxidermy assistant, and that kind of really creeps her out. She's really not into the idea of taxidermy, but as she starts learning about it and as she starts doing it, she's actually really good, and she gets more and more creative with that side of things. But the couple that she's living with are completely dysfunctional. So the woman is called Sophie. She is really wanting to have a baby, and her husband and her drink a lot of alcohol, and they have these blazing rows. They host weddings at their country house, and the husband doesn't really seem to, he doesn't really seem to earn too much money, like, towards the household expenses and stuff. And Sophie's parents, like, her dad is, like, really right-wing and terrible. And Sophie and Mirka start falling in love, and so there's this really awkward dynamic because Mirka really gets on with the husband. So Mirka's gay and she really gets on with the husband. She's really good friends with him, but then she's also falling in love with his wife. And this is such a great story. Like, the narrator was amazing, the writing was amazing, the story was amazing. I absolutely loved this book. It was a strong 5 stars for me. And if you want to read about a dysfunctional couple, a queer love story, and an English country house, and taxidermy. I mean, I was nervous about the taxidermy element, being a vegan, but I would say that I was okay. It was okay to handle. It was fine. And I loved this book. It was fantastic. So that was like another strong start, followed by one of the best non-fiction, if not the best non-fiction I've ever read, which was Know My Name by Chanel Miller. And this is a memoir, and I listened to this on Audible, and Chanel narrates the Audible herself, which is really powerful. And if anybody who doesn't know, Chanel Miller was on the campus of Stanford University in America a few years ago when she was raped by a male student of the university. And she basically was at a party with her sister, and then she woke up in the hospital not knowing what had happened to her. And it's about the whole aftermath. So from the moment that she wakes up in the hospital, everything that happens to her, and then the court trial and the aftermath of the court trial, and what it's like for her as a survivor of a sexual assault, what it's like for her friends, her family, and also the fact that the guy who did this to her was basically let off the hook because he was a really good swimmer, and so then he was obviously a good person. So this story is just incredible, and Chanel can write so well. Like, she is a writer now, and she writes beautifully. She writes so well about all of her feelings, about what happened, about the court proceedings, about what it's like to be in her shoes. And it was so powerful and so moving. And her impact statement of what happened to her was viewed by something like 8 million people in the first week it went online. Her story went really viral, and she is just an incredible woman. This has obviously got big trigger warnings for rape, sexual assault, court, all of that kind of, all of those things. But if you can still listen to this or read this, I would so recommend, because it just makes you understand what it's like to be a woman and what the legal system is like for people going through these kinds of cases. And it's really phenomenal, and I just can't recommend it hard enough. And I really recommend men listen to it as well, because like me and my husband talked about this case loads, and I was just it was incredible to me that it even had to go through this huge court trial, because it was so clear what happened. There was witnesses, it was just so clear what happened, and yet she had to be pulled apart. Every single minutiae of her life, including being watched by private investigators and everything, had to happen, even though people saw what he did, and he ran from the scene and people caught him, and still it had to go through all of this. And it was just, there's so much that I could talk about with this book, but it is phenomenal, and definitely in my top books of the year so far. Possibly my favourite ever non-fiction. Amazing book. Then it all started to go a bit south after that. I mean, obviously Chanel set the bar super high, so it wasn't exactly going to go any higher, but it wasn't great after that. So the next book that I read was a buddy read with Joe, and we buddy read Akin by Emma Donoghue, and I absolutely adored The Pit of the Stars by Emma Donoghue. I really liked Room, and Akin, both Joe and I found was a big letdown. I gave it 2.5 stars. I think Joe might have given it 3 stars. But it's about a kid and his great uncle Noah. So Noah is basically, his wife has died, and he's originally from France, and he's planned for his 80th birthday to go to France, revisit his childhood memory locations. And he's also found some mysterious photos from his mum, which he doesn't know what they mean, and he's gone to investigate these photos as well. And just before he's about to go, he gets a call from social services to say that there's a kid, Michael, who is his nephew's son, who he doesn't know, and his mum is in prison and his dad has died and he has nowhere to go, and could Noah possibly look after him for a while to try and figure out what's going to happen. So Noah kind of feels like he has no option, because otherwise the kid will end up in care. So he decides to take Michael on holiday to France with him, and they have to kind of get to know each other. So the premise sounds good, but there was so many things which weren't believable in the plot. There were so many bits where me and Joe were like, really? Because I have to really suspend belief for that to have happened. And Michael as a child was really annoying. Like, he was so annoying that we didn't really have any sympathy for him, even though he was in a really hard situation. He was like constantly sort of swearing all the time and just like being a little shit, really. And he was rude. I don't know, we just kind of got sick of him. And then because of it was like the writing wasn't amazing. Like, so, you know, sometimes if the plot's not amazing but the writing's amazing, it sort of counteracts. But the writing wasn't as good as Emma Donohue's other work, and the plot was full of holes in our opinion, and I just didn't really enjoy it. And then it kind of put me in a bit of a slump after that, because I didn't really want to pick it up, so I was doing other things apart from reading. And if it wasn't a buddy read, I think I would have DNF'd. But Joe and I both agreed that we wanted to continue and finish our buddy read. And it's no reflection on Joe, because I love doing buddy reads with Joe. So after that, I then finished How to Be a Victorian by Ruth Goodman, because I started reading this, got about halfway, had to put it down for some reason, and then never finished it. So I wanted to finish this one. I got this recommendation from Ruby Granger, who really enjoyed this book a year ago, I think. This is basically, it's really interesting. It's non-fiction, and it's spending a day in the life of a working class Victorian person. So the first chapters are like about getting up in the morning, and it ends with going to bed in the evening. And in between, so the chapters cover, so getting up, getting dressed, going to the toilet, grooming, morning exercise, breakfast, the day, the midday meal, work, school, leisure, evening meal, bath before bed, and behind the bedroom door. So they are the sections of the book. It's really interesting because the Victorian period covers a really long period of time as well. So it's not like the beginning and the end were the same. There was a lot of changes through the times, and it was really interesting to read about their attitudes to things, how different things worked, how hard life was, you know, like how small the houses were and how many people were living there with, you know, no toilets and no heating and no hot water, and, you know, like all the things that we sort of take for granted in our countries. And it was really interesting, the food as well. Like everyone lived off bread and potatoes and ale, basically, really unhealthy diets. There was a lot about sort of germ theory and how people thought that they got ill, and so the things they did to sort of counteract becoming ill, even though they were, like, now we know they're completely false. Dressing, you know, like lots of different things about the clothes. I mean, how so impractical the clothes that the women had to wear. Like, my goodness, I'm so glad we don't have to wear those kind of clothes now. But it's just really, really interesting, and the writing was very engaging, and I thought it was really good. I think if you're interested in history and you're interested in especially the Victorian era and what it's like for sort of the average person at that time, rather than the wealthy people who we often tend to hear about, then I think you'd really enjoy this. It was a great book. I then listened to The Book of Not by Tsitsi Dangarembga, and I was really looking forward to this because this is the second book in a trilogy, and the first book, which was Nervous Conditions, I absolutely loved last year. It was like in my top 3 of the books last year, and this one, it was really depressing. So we are following a young woman living in, at the time, Rhodesia, becoming Zimbabwe. And Tambitsai is the girl who we're following. And we've been following her ever since she was a small child living in her village in book 1. And she's now at a mission school in book 2. And it was just really depressing. I'm really sorry to say, like, the range of characters wasn't as big as in the first book. So in the first book, we really got a sense of the tradition, the culture, how family members interacted, like lots of things to do with the way of life that they had in their community. And this time, because she'd gone to like a European school where white people were basically trying to they had taken over everything, and they were trying to instruct black people to forget about all those kind of things and learn their ways. We lost kind of a lot of that culture, which was really sad, but also it was horrific in terms of the racism. I mean, I'm so angered by the fact that the European people are in the country of the Rhodesians, or the Zimbabweans now, and they think that it's their country. They think that they can segregate themselves from black people. They think they can make black people work for them. They're not allowed to sit near them, you know, and it's their country. It's just making me it makes me so angry. Like the whole idea of colonialization just, oh my God, makes me just so mad. So there's that, which is obviously historically, factually correct. And then Tambizai, because of the circumstances she finds herself in, she's just like one thing after another goes wrong for her. She becomes more unlikable. Like, you don't root for her as much. You do, but you don't at the same time because of some of the things she does. And this book really made me drop my mood when I was listening to it. I really felt miserable, and I really wanted to finish it because I didn't want to abandon her in the middle of a series. I do still want to read the third book, but interestingly, the ratings on Goodreads go from really high for the first book to a bit lower for the second book and lower for the third book. But the third book was on the Booker Prize list a few years ago. So I do want to continue, but I'm going to have a break from it because it really, you know, it's not often that a book actually makes me feel low in mood, and it really did. So that, again, didn't help my sort of slumpy kind of feeling. And then the last book that I read was Lily King, 5 Tuesdays in Winter. Now, I really loved Writers and Lovers by Lily King. I loved that book. I then read Euphoria by her, which was just okay. And this one I really did like. There are 10 short stories in here. I'm not the biggest short story reader in the world, but these short stories are brilliant. 7 of them I found fantastic. 3 of them I found like either okay or didn't really enjoy. So I couldn't give it 5 stars because those 3 stories, you know, I didn't really enjoy too much. The ones that I loved were the coming of age stories. So there were some stories in here set in Summer's Gone By. Really good coming of age stories with teenage protagonists who you just really felt like you were that age reading it. You know, you could really remember and relate to the things that happened. There were just some really great stories in here, and I loved her writing style. I felt like all of the stories were believable, and you really got immersed for just the right amount of time. You didn't, when you finished them, you didn't think, well, that was a waste of time because now I don't know what's going to happen next. You know, that bit was finished, and you also had time to get into the story. Some of them are quite long. Like I think the first story is about 45 pages and the shortest one's 9 pages. But I thought this was a brilliant collection. And there's one called When in the Dordogne, which I think was probably my favourite. But I thought this was a brilliant collection, back to not quite as good as Writers and Lovers for the aforementioned reasons, but really good. And I still want to read everything Lily King writes. So, and then at the minute I'm reading The Promise by Damon Galgut, which is our book club choice for work. And again, I'm not massively into it. So I don't know if it's just because I'm in a bit of a slump generally at the moment, but yeah, I think as soon as I finished it, presuming I finish it, as soon as I finished it, I'm going to just read something really light, maybe some YA or something, because I feel like I've read some quite heavy stuff and I just need a bit of light relief. I'm listening to Still Alive by Sarah Women, which I'm really enjoying. And yeah, so we'll see how those ones go in July. But tell me what you've read in... how they go in August. I keep getting my months mixed up. Tell me what you've been reading in July and what your best highlights of July have been. Or if you have any thoughts on the books that I've read, then please feel free to tell me. And I hope you all have a lovely week, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye!